What's up, gamers? It's Above, and in today's video, we have a highly requested topic from yesterday's videos, that being Arc 3.0 Hunter builds surrounding the brand new Super Gathering Storm. If you guys didn't catch my DPS test yesterday against supers like Thunder Crash, Tether, and Blade Barrage, you guys definitely need to go check out that video because the results, no pun intended, will shock you. If you guys do enjoy the video, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get into it. So let's dive into the basics of this subclass. First up, obviously, we have the brand new Gathering Storm Super. This was released with Arc 3.0 and is now one of the highest DPS supers in the game, but it also brings a ton of utility because it has AoE ad clear and does damage over time. The throw animation is also extremely quick, which means you can throw this at a boss and then passively damage the boss with that super while you're actively damaging with things like linear fusion rifles, or maybe you even get up in the face of a boss with something like Acreus, where you can utilize Trench Barrel with its newly buffed catalyst. Before we dive into abilities, aspects, or fragments, and any of our further build recommendations, the main thing you want to remember with the Arc 3.0 update is that all subclasses are going to be focused on speed and neutral game benefits such as reload, handling, and movement. These are things that are going to help you a lot in endgame because the faster you're reloading means the faster you're killing things, and the faster we can take advantage of weapons like Forbearance that are also Arc that synergize with the rest of the abilities and subclass benefits I'll be recommending today. The first ability of note is Gambler's Dodge, and this is extremely important because every time you dodge near an enemy, it's going to refund your powered melee attack, and this pairs extremely well with Combination Blow because every time we use our powered melee on an enemy and secure a kill, it not only grants you a small bit of health, it also begins damage stacking your melee damage on top of refunding your dodge. So every time we melee an enemy, we get our dodge back. Every time we dodge, we get our melee back. And this is a perfect gameplay loop that is not only satisfying, it's extremely viable as well because of new blinding mechanics with some of the aspects and fragments that we have, along with chained lightning abilities and increased damage resist that I'll be covering later in the video. This is the first time outside of Solar Titan that I felt like melee builds may be viable in endgame content. This class has three aspects to choose from, the first of which is Lethal Current. After dodging, your next melee attack has increased lunge range, jolts the target, and creates a damaging aftershock. Damaging any jolted target with melee attacks also blinds them. Since this is a melee-oriented subclass, this is extremely strong because if you don't happen to one-hit a major, it's going to blind them, which means this is endgame viable because it's not only chaining lightning to surrounding enemies on kills, which makes killing trash mobs more efficient than ever before, it also gives you utility against these harder enemies because you're able to blind and suppress them when you continue to damage with things like Acreus or other heavy weapons of your choice. And this synergizes extremely well with our next aspect, which is Flow State. And the text reads that defeating a jolted target makes you amplified. While you're amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly, you're more resilient while dodging, and your reload speed is greatly increased. Now, if this doesn't sound like perfect synergy with Gambler's Dodge and Combination Blow, I'm not sure what does. But what I love about this subclass is that these abilities all tie together extremely well. We haven't even touched on fragments, exotic armor, or armor mods just yet, and this subclass is already providing us with a top-tier DPS super, 100% uptime on our dodge and charged melee abilities, the ability to proc health regen, increased melee damage, increased dodge recharge rate, increased resilience while dodging, increased reload speed, increased sprint speed, and the ability to blind enemies. These are all neutral benefits from just using the subclass, and we haven't even scratched the surface. There are several viable fragments depending on your playstyle, but there are four that I went with that I felt were a cut above the rest. Starting with Spark of Beacons, which grants your special weapons the ability to create blinding explosions when you're amplified. And the great thing about this subclass is that we should be amplified almost all of the time. Next up, we have Spark of Resistance, which states that while surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. We've done some testing, and this equates to roughly a 20 25% damage resistance while surrounded by enemies, which stacks on top of tier 10 resilience. So when you stack these two together, it's incredible how hard you are to kill, especially when you're constantly proccing health regen with combination blow. We also have Spark of Shock, which allows your arc grenades to jolt targets. And if you guys remember our aspects from earlier, when we melee a jolted target, it also blinds them. And defeating jolted targets with our melee will allow us to become amplified, which means if our grenade is able to provide us with a source of jolt as well, we'll keep that amplification up even more consistently. And lastly, we have Spark of Recharge, which states that while critically wounded, your melee and grenade energy regenerates more quickly. This is useful in sketchy situations where you may not have your dodge or charged melee available to you. So say you happen to mistime your dodge, or you don't have one available when damaging a group of enemies, this will help you get that ability chaining back on track. Some other viable options that you guys can use, especially if you're leaning more into the blinding special weapon side of this subclass, is Spark of Discharge, where arc weapon final blows have the chance to create an ionic trace. If you guys are doing something like dungeon farming in Master Duality, Spark of Frequency could be a great option, especially with something like Acreus if you're not amplified, where melee hits greatly increase your reload speed for a short duration. And lastly, we have Spark of Volts. This is going to be incredibly strong as well because it's a guaranteed source of amplification, which means we'll be getting all of those crazy benefits basically for free just by finishing an enemy that's low health. In terms of exotics, there are several amazing options that we can go with, including Star Eater Scales, which will amplify the damage of our Gathering Storm super, making it one of the highest damage single burst supers in the game. So if you guys are in an encounter where DPS is going to matter and you have a really tight DPS check, maybe throw on Star Eater Scales and you're going to do some insane damage for your fire team. Next, we have Assassin's Cowl, which will make you invis on charged melee hits and finishers, which means every time we get our powered melee, we're going to go invisible, which offers even more survivability for the subclass than we've seen in the past because we have so many passive benefits, including damage resistance when traveling between targets. And lastly, and by far my favorite, we have Liar's Handshake. And I love this exotic for several reasons. The first is I don't have to change my playstyle to take advantage of it. It just naturally enhances what this subclass does best. Using your arc melee ability or being hit by a melee attack will allow you to follow up with an extremely powerful melee counterpunch that heals you. And yes, this stacks with combination blow, which we touched on earlier in the video. So we'll not only be healing twice for every powered melee kill that we get, we'll also be dealing even more damage, which makes this subclass unbelievable for survivability and overall raw damage output. In terms of armor mods, I'm going for more of a generalist build that's going to help you in any piece of content that you play through. These can obviously be modified for more DPS scenarios, but I think this will be great regardless of the content that you're playing. Starting off with Melee Wellmaker. This mod allows powered melee combatant final blows to spawn elemental wells that match our subclass. So every time I get a powered melee kill, which works fantastic with combination blow yet again, we'll be creating an arc elemental well. And we're going to pair this with Font of Might. We're picking up an elemental well that matches our subclass energy type, aka arc elemental wells, gives us a bonus damage to arc weapons, such as Forbearance, or Salvager Salvo, or Acreus, Storm Chaser, Hothead, you name it. There are so many meta options right now that we can use that will either blind enemies, do increased damage to enemies, or be top tier DPS options when using something like Star Eater Scales, where we're then going to DPS with a heavy weapon. This provides so much flexibility, and Melee Wellmaker makes this a fantastic pairing with Font of Might because as we're in combat meleeing enemies and regenning health, we'll also be supercharging our weapons with a 25% damage bonus. Next, we have Powerful Friends, and I mostly use this for the plus 20 mobility because hunters are extremely stat hungry characters. Even though you don't need mobility with this subclass, I still like to have some just in case I do lose my dodge or powered melee because it will allow me to start chaining my abilities even faster once again. The main stat you want to focus on is 100 resilience because when you pair this with Spark of Resistance, it makes you an absolute land tank running around regenning health and having all that damage resistance while you're also utilizing your increased movement speed. The combination of these three things is absolutely insane. I also used Well of love striking, where picking up an arc elemental well grants you additional melee energy. So again, if I happen to lose my powered melee or dodge, this will help me start chaining my abilities again faster. Same with focusing strike, which is an artifact mod from this season that grants class ability energy when you cause damage with your melee attack. So if I lose my dodge and I'm damaging a boss with my powered melee, I can get my dodge back simply by punching the boss, which is really cool and super useful in a lot of situations. And lastly, I use Well of Ions, where picking up an arc elemental well causes your next melee to deal increased damage, which is a 30% increase to our melee damage. So not only do we have combination blow ×3 and Liar's Handshake to amplify that damage even further, we also have Well of Ions that's going to allow us to pretty much one-hit anything, especially when you pair it with something like a 1-2 punch shotgun. The combination of all of these things is absolutely ridiculous and so much fun to play with. I paired this with Hands On to gain bonus super energy on melee kill, which we'll be doing constantly. So it basically feels like you have 100 intellect because we're constantly meleeing enemies, getting kills, and recharging our super. If you're running something like Star Eater Scales, I recommend running Harmonic Siphon to create orbs of power when you get kills that match your subclass type. So for example, if I'm using Forbearance and I'm getting multi-kills, this will generate orbs of power that I can use to proc Feast of Light and begin building stacks for DPS. So all of these things combined, you have mods that will help you for DPS, you have mods that will help you for survivability and ability uptime. This subclass is so much fun to play with. I highly encourage you to try it out. If you feel like I missed any crazy mods, definitely feel free to leave a comment down below. I love build crafting with everybody, and this is my favorite part of the season because we get to find incredible stuff like this. Anyways, guys, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. A like and subscription would be greatly appreciated yet again if you did enjoy the video, and I'll catch you next time. Peace!